The new Heroes of the Borderlands set is an awesome starter set. Today, we're going to look at specific tips you can use to make running this wilderness section even better. First thing I want to do is share, hey, if you're a new DM and you are coming into this video wondering for tips for how to run, I want to give you some general advice. It's good advice for any DM, but especially if you are new. First, this booklet specifically has advice around switching off DMs. I absolutely suggest that you do that. It's really fun to not be the only DM at a table. It will let you, the primary DM, recharge if you happen to be the primary DM. It teaches skills, the other parts of the game, to more than one person in the group. This will actually make your games down the road better because your players, who are also DMs, will understand what you are trying to do when you are DM, and they'll help you do that. They will tell better stories. They'll have more of an understanding of how to interact with NPCs. They'll learn the rules better. They'll understand the flow of combat and what makes for excitement and neat aspects of play. And it will be a better game because you have more than one DM. As much as you may want to own the story or the experience, sharing it for this starter set will help all of these goals be better down the road as you become a DM for a longer time. I also want to say, don't sweat the small stuff and don't worry if you feel some anxiety before running. Players want to play. The biggest gift a player can have is somebody, a warm body that wants to run a game for them. That is amazing. It's so incredible to have somebody who wants to run a game for you. That is a gift. They are not expecting perfection. And they will know, especially if they take turns DMing, that it's not going to be flawless. And it's okay. Everybody makes mistakes all the time, or has a little rough spot, or has to think for the right thing to say, and so on. That's all right. And even a game that has what you might think of internally as being so-so is a fun evening for people. So the bar is actually pretty low. Over time, you're going to get better. Your players will also get better. And so just relax, realize that what you're doing is an amazing benefit and a gift to everybody, and just have some fun out there. The best way to get some confidence is to just have a little preparation for the concepts that you're going to start with that'll give you some solid ground on your feet and then help ease into everything else. Because the fun of D&D and role-playing games in general is that you don't know exactly what will happen. Sometimes you don't know at all what your players will do or where the game will go. And so they will know that too, right? Because if they see that they can have the freedom to do really neat things and interesting ideas and take you left when you thought they would go right, that means they know they're doing that. They will understand that you are improvising, and it'll be okay. And you will get better and better as you go and as you run more games. So don't worry about that, about trying to hit some level of perfection. Nobody hits it. It's totally fine. One way that you can lighten your load is to share that load. For example, the player's guide that you have with all the rules right here. This is not something that you need to feel you must memorize or understand perfectly. And so it's perfectly a great idea to give this to one of the players and say, hey, do you mind being our rules person for the evening? If something comes up and one of us doesn't know what we're doing, we'll look it up here and let them lead that effort. And that also says, hey, I'm not going to run the rules perfectly. Nobody will, because nobody does. So it's okay. You run it instead of me, the DM, doing it, right? So that's one of the ways that you can share things. You can also share other things, like if you use a system for initiative. You can see my video on how I track initiative with little table tents. Having someone who gives those out and making it their job, right? Do whatever you need to do to offload some of your work to others so that you feel like everybody's invested in it and you can focus on the parts that are important, which is leading the adventure booklet and that experience, working from it. I will say as a designer something that you may not know, which is that this design is not perfect. I can speak for all my own things that I've created. None of them are perfect. If I woke up one day, I might have written it one way, but I woke up on that day a certain perspective in my brain and I wrote it a particular way. That does not make it sacred or perfect or inviolate. In fact, it could easily have ended up a different way. So you should feel free as DM to change whatever you see in this booklet to make it fit. This also means that if you are running something, an encounter, a scene, and you see, you remember something like, oh, I think there's something about this. You may think you need to look that up and find it and spend time looking through the book, finding that one thing that you thought was there so you get it right. But there is no right. So feel free to just make it up. If you don't find a thing and you kind of thought it was a certain way, go with whatever you sort of semi-remember and play off of that. It will probably be better than whatever is there. This is true of my own adventures. And I make the same mistake. I will sometimes run an adventure I wrote, and I will feel like I have to look it up to get it right. When I made it up, I can make it up again, right? So feel free to make things up as you go rather than feeling you must search through this and look it up perfectly. One approach I would suggest is that when you're planning out your next game session and it's your turn to DM, think about where you want the characters to start and plan that out so that you have a nice solid footing, right? Rather than start with, where do you guys want to go? Which means you're right off the bat going to be flipping pages and thinking things. Do that at the end of the session. Where will we want to go next session, right? Even if someone else is DMing. Come up with that plan so that you can prep that part. That'll give you a strong start. And if somehow there wasn't a plan at the end of the session, just go with one. You have been direct, like in media res, like you're in a movie and you just start off. You are on the trail headed towards blah because you were told by so-and-so in the keep to head over here. Yeah, just make that up. And that way you can start with an encounter that you have prepared, that you have some solidity around, and that'll give you a nice solid start, give you ground under your feet. And from there, you can see where they want to go and improvise. But you start with that nice prepared encounter, right? Cool. I hope that's been helpful. If you have any questions about running this as a new DM, please, I welcome seeing as much of that perspective as I can. Leave a question down below and I will answer it. I also say that the box set is based on a classic adventure, an old adventure called B2, The Keep on the Borderlands. And there are various versions of this that have been made for other editions. You may wonder, do I have to go find that? No, you really don't. This version is updated from that classic version to provide a great experience. I've read over the old one again to refresh my mind. It's one of the first adventures I ever ran when I was a wee kid, and there really isn't anything to draw from it. You're good. And while there are neat versions for 4th edition and 5th edition with a lot of neat ideas, I would not, unless you really love doing research, I don't think you need any of these old versions. This is a very, very nice update, and you don't need to go back to the classic, though you certainly can if you wish. Now let's just lay down some simple basics in case you haven't seen this. There are 3 different adventure booklets in this box set: Wilderness, Keep on the Borderlands, and Caves of Chaos. Those are topically put together, right? All of the locations in the Caves of Chaos, all of the locations and NPCs in the Keep, and so on. But the ideal way to play through this, the way that will be more fun for the players and for the DM, is to go back and forth between these. When you're in the Caves of Chaos and you start running low on hit points as players, as characters, your players will want to go back to the Keep and rest, which means that ideally there's something new for them to discover. So you don't use up all of your NPCs and places in the Keep right at the beginning. That way you keep some surprises, right? Or Wilderness, similarly, you don't want to run through the entire wilderness such that going through the wilderness, you've got nothing to add. Okay. So ideally you will interlink between them. And I'll talk in each of these videos. I'm going to do one for each of the booklets. I will walk you through what I would suggest. It's just my suggestion of how to establish that cadence, right? The Wilderness book is a great place to start your campaign, which is what's suggested. And that's because it's deliberately written to be an easy to run starting point. We just had on our podcast Mastering Dungeons. You can check out that podcast or YouTube channel. We interviewed the lead designer for this starter set, Justice Ramin Arman, and he recommends the initial sequence of trail quests that are in this Wilderness booklet. as a way for a new TM to get grounding. And I absolutely agree with that. The first set of encounters, as he describes on our podcast, really give you a non-pressure way to go through skill checks, and then skill checks with an NPC, and then skill checks with an NPC when more is going on, and so on. And so it sort of builds onto itself. So you really could run the trail encounters through the bandit ambush as a sequence, and that would be a really nice training ground. So when it comes to running the wilderness set, consider that as an option. However, it means you will have used up all of those trail encounters. And so won't have some natural ones to intersperse. However, an important thing is the very end of this book, at the end of it, has a bunch of random encounters. And so it's easy to forget because you see these set encounters and you don't realize, hey, there are these wilderness encounters. So you could use those to make later trail, while on the trail encounters interesting by using some of these that would be fun. You also could run the first set of encounters up until the ambush, which sets in motion the idea that there are some interesting NPCs in the keep, that there are bandits around probably, that the forest can be dangerous in various ways. But if you keep that final bandit ambush, and by the way, I should say, this video has spoilers. So it's just going to have spoilers. There's no way around that. So if you keep the ambush to a later time, it actually will build a little bit of tension. You won't get that initial combat, but you could do a different encounter that would provide a combat for them. And so you could, from the trail, have them experience one of the encounters, or even just go to the keep having not experienced the combat yet, and give one to them later. It's up to you. I would probably run not the ambush yet, because I would want that ambush to be a little bit of a payoff for looking into rumors and talking to people and figuring out what's going wrong. And what I might do is choose one of the encounters that's nearby, like woods or fens that I like, and run it. Which one isn't necessarily important. The woods and something like the occult ritual could work well to establish the existence of the cult in the area, or the sparring sprites. Either of those could be a lot of fun, where you can just have them see something like something flitter off into the woods and you're not sure what that was, and follow it, and there are the sprites. And that could be an interesting encounter that would be worth checking out. The cultist is a little more likely to run into combat, which is one of the things that you're possibly looking for there. I'll say that a lot of these encounters have the option of combat, which is good. That's good design, something that is favored more and more these days, of the option of it. What this also does, however, is you have to realize we want to realize that the game of D&D is a lot of fun when we fight, right? Lots of space in the core books or in this play guide are devoted to the rules of combat, because combat is fun and exciting and neat, just like in movies and in novels. And so as much as we do enjoy talking to NPCs and so on, you want to have some opportunities for fighting. So if you find that you're not ending up in combat, that's where these wilderness encounters can be really cool, and you can run them really as a fight, right? Take that monster and say, this is going to be a fight encounter. Even if this is presented as maybe something that you could avoid, you decide that this is, the creatures are hostile and this is going to be a fight because we need to get some fun fighting on. In fact, that's a perfectly possible thing to do, is run those 3 first sort of more skill-based trail encounters. And then when you get, and so those are the, go here to the trail section, the looted wagon, the talkative traveler, and game trail, you could run those as a nice introductory experience that makes sure everybody knows how to do rolling. And then just take one of the simpler fights, like, 2 goblin warriors, and just have them attack as an ambush, right? Some creatures are, in this kind of D&D setting, are just out to get you, and you can go with that. There's actually a random trail encounters, so you could use one of those. Like maybe just have a couple bandits attack without any explanation, the way there is in the larger bandit encounter. So again, fun way to do it. You start on the trail, and one of the things that is missing in this series of adventures, and it's on purpose, Justice, the designer, talked about this, there is no overarching goal or story that is evolving the way there might be in a novel or movie. There is some story there, but it's not an active one that takes you from start to finish. And at the end you go, okay, I've finished the story. Other than saying, I've cleaned out the caves. There are no more bad things there. This is on purpose. They did this because if there were a lot of story angles with reveals, but you're supposed to be running different DMs, well, then that intrudes on itself, right? And the story starts falling apart. So the story is kind of what you make of it, and it's more about a situation that's taking place, right? And as you play, the story will be the story that you all tell together within the setting of the keep needing help, the caves of chaos being a growing threat that, if unchecked, will result in trouble and danger for the keep, and that will make the woods and the trails less safe, right? So that's your larger situation, even if it's not a full story. And what you can do is start with a goal. So in addition to taking some time to go over the character boards and letting them know that they're starting on the trail, let them know that they're going to the keep. Why? Because the keep, they have heard rumors, is a place that needs help and pays well. That can be their impetus, right? So on the map, they will be moving from the corner of the map, from one side of the map along the trail towards the keep. And that gives you a nice ability to run a couple, say those 3 initial trail encounters, and then maybe you use a random encounter or one of the woods encounters like the Sprites, something that could give you some combat, and then they'll reach the keep. Then what you can do is give them part of the keep. I'll talk about this more in the next video. And now return to explore some areas of the wilderness, back to the keep when they're tired. Eventually, they will go to the caves of chaos, having explored a lot of the woods. And you can repeat this process of, as you're going back and forth, right? Resting in the keep, going into either the woods or the caves of chaos, in which case they go through the woods and might encounter something on the way to the caves and coming back. That cadence will be fun. It will keep things interesting and different because you're doing the woods, the wilderness, every now and then, rather than completing all of the wilderness and then being done with it. It'll also make it feel a little more like a story. It'll let you and the other DMs possibly add some connections between things, which is a fun way to do it. Particularly in the Caves of Chaos section, the last booklet, there are a lot of sort of angles to the story of an individual location that can touch on another location. And you can do that as well in the wilderness. We'll talk about that a bit. All right, so we talked about how adding a goal of going towards the keep is a nice way to start. I will also say that in the keep, there is a quest in Area 14, the fortress, where Dwarn the Scribe hires you to explore 3 areas in the wilds. So that's good to keep in mind, because if you run through all of this and complete all of the wilderness and then go to the keep, Dwarn will say, hey, I want to hire you, never mind, right? And so Dwarn is the person that can give you that impetus to go explore other areas. There are a couple of other NPCs as well. I'll talk about that in the next video, that can also send you to some missions in the wilderness. But Dwarn is the one that really hires you explicitly to map out this dangerous area. And this means exploring 3 different areas. So what I would do, spoiler for next video, is move Dwarn into the inner keep, not the fortress area, and have him provide that quest early on, which gets people to explore the wilderness. This also works well because the wilderness works well when you're lower level, and the Caves of Chaos can be more dangerous. So this will also help your characters not get in over their heads. Cool? All right. Let's talk a little bit about character advancement. The rules here in the wilderness set tell us after they complete at least 1 encounter in all 4 regions, everyone in the party gains 1 level. So that's Woods, Trail, Fens, and Tamarack Stand. So that's great. And then it says this only happens once. And if they're already level 3, they won't go up a level. So it's kind of ideal if they get level 2 out of having done this. Starting the game on the trail means they'll have completed 1 encounter in the trail. And then they just need Woods, Fens, and Tamarack Stand, which is 3 regions, which works for Dwarn the Scribe's quest, right? So go into at least one of these, or each of these woods, fens, and tamarack stand, and complete any one quest in one area, and you're good for that Dwarven the Scribe quest, which is cool, and you'll also gain a level and be second level. So it all works very smoothly if you weave that together. Cool? All right. So if you follow my recommendations, you will start on the trail, have those 3 encounters, maybe a little combat type encounter that's easy and sweet to just give you those feelings. You get to the keep, you meet a couple of people in there. We'll talk about that next time, but particularly you'll meet Dwarven the Scribe, who will hire you to go to 3 other areas. Once you do that, you will also level, because that's how advancement works in the Wilderness booklet, and you'll be level 2 so that everybody is a little hardier, and they'll have by this point a fair amount of experience at handling situations. It's worth knowing that the Wilderness, because you can't level up further, you don't have to worry about them doing too much in the Wilderness, and now they don't get to explore the caves. And the caves can be hard, so it's really fine for them to get that second level in the forest or in the Wilderness. They won't level out of anything. It'll all be fine. And once they've done Dwarven the Scribe's quest of the 3 areas, they can go and explore additional pieces. In fact, they may do so while they're out there exploring, right? We want to move around further in the fens. Okay, cool. Here's this other encounter, right? We have a number of encounters in each area. And let me just say that a little more clearly, which is that the general makeup of this is we have the Wilderness. It has 4 regions, right, that I mentioned. Each region has 4 encounters, and sometimes they're linked in some way. So you can choose to just do the one, and that completes the quest, but you can go further if you want. You can also save them to link them to other personages in the keep and send people back there, or have a map in the Caves of Chaos that leads you, right? There are a lot of ways that you could choose to link back to these experiences so that you complete them, right? If you have one in here that you love and it hasn't come out yet because nobody went there, you can give some tip from somebody, some reason that, you know, a pixie stole my, or a sprite stole my scarf, you know, I think they live in this area of the forest. Will you go get my scarf back? Right? I mean, just anything like that, right? Make up whatever you want. A treasure map that they find in one of the Caves of Chaos, right? That sends you back there. So if you really want to do that encounter, you can find a way to do it, or move it to be on the trail as they're heading from one direction to the other. And that's important too. It often makes sense. It feels good to have an encounter on the way to the Caves of Chaos as sort of a warm-up. But it can also be interesting to do it on the way back, and they may be actually more hurt, which means you can use an easy encounter and it's still a challenge, which a lot of these wilderness counters are on the easier side compared to other things in the book. All right, great. I've yapped for a bit, so let me just dig into specific encounters and things that I would change. Overall, I find these encounters to be really, really cool. They're exceptionally well done. Great design here. So a few things that I would recommend is to think about the story behind an individual scene. And a good example is the ambush on the trail. So this is the 4th encounter that we get for the trail, called Bandit Ambush. And a character, NPC known as Prowl, comes out and he's all very roguish and charismatic and trying to, you know, your money or your life, but with that sort of charming bandit way. Something that's helpful when you're running this is to think through, who is Prowl? Right? He's this interesting character that clearly likes a fanciful life, spends money on monogrammed shoes or monogrammed boots. Why is Prowl a bandit? What led him to do this? How is he linked to other events that are happening? Like, is he completely separate from what's going on in the Caves of Chaos? He doesn't feel like he fits in with the Caves of Chaos. So maybe he's actually not all that bad, you know, and maybe he's afraid of the Caves of Chaos as well. And maybe he's been, a cultist tried to recruit him and he said no. There could be some interesting things there. Did he used to live in the keep? Did he go to the keep and have a bad experience? You could think about where this happened, right? Maybe somebody in the keep, he feels like they took advantage of him, and so now he became a bandit to like steal their goods, right? And found it pay. Well, play with that idea and think about why Prowl is a bandit. If you come up with an answer for that, That'll make it a lot easier to run this in an interesting way, possibly linking to the keep to other NPCs. And that's a nice way that you can start weaving a larger story together if you want when it's your turn to DM. At a similar level, the sprites. The encounter with the sprites that happens, sparring sprites in the region of number 2 called the Woods. Why are they training, right? It says here that they're training and you get to sort of fight with them to help them do their training. Well, what scared them? So that's where you could have the sprites give the characters some insight into the threats. Well, if you go, I forget on the map where this is, I think east of here, you're going to end up east and northeast of here. You're going to end up at the Caves of Chaos. They're super dangerous. Goblins have been attacking us, or kobolds, or whatever you want to go with, hobgoblins. And that can start sharing some information. Maybe they can even give you one of the important tips that I'll talk about in the third video around the Caves of Chaos, which is which caves are the most dangerous, right? They might have heard from one of the creatures that these fearsome creatures live on the ones that are higher up and further away from the entrance to the ravine, and those tend to be the most dangerous. And maybe they even know that the ones on the northern side, the ones on the right as you enter, are easier even when you go a little bit up the slope, right? That's a tricky part to do, but it's nice if the players don't get in over their heads and their characters. So giving them a tip towards that also helps you to create a more manageable flow, and so they face the harder things later. The encounter that gets into the swamp that has the sturges in it, this might be the first time they encounter sturges. There's another place in the adventure that has sturges as well. That encounter, you might want to let the PCs, when they first find a body, inspect it, have them make some checks, and maybe that could gain them advantage on initiative when the actual sturges show up, if they succeeded on some checks to figure out something like a medicine check to figure out what might have happened to this body. You could also, for the lizard folk, think about a better story behind the mud mounds. Right now, it's just sort of like we store treasure in these mud mounds, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Seems like a really weird banking system. But maybe they leave offerings to forest spirits, or they are the graves of their ancestors, and so they always give a portion back. That would really explain, why do they do this, and why do they take great offense if somebody is messing with the mud mounds. I'll also point out that a number of these encounters, if not most, have scaling information. This means the idea that if you want it to be harder, if you want it to be easier. And this is important to think about. The way I handle scaling is I think about what is fun in the encounter and what is fun in the pacing of the game that I'm running. For example, we might have just had a really hard fight. So fun right now would probably be an easy fight to get everybody back on their feet, the players specifically, but also their characters, but make them emotionally feel like, oh yeah, now there's an upswing and we've got some momentum going. We don't have to use up all our precious resources. And then you get hit with a harder fight after that. So understanding that flow and getting a read for how the players are feeling, right? Maybe they had a tough fight and you think they want another tough fight because they're like, yeah, that was amazing. Let's have another one like that. Okay. That's where the scaling information really helps you to think on during play how it will impact play. And you can weave this in dynamically. This is a really important thing about scaling. Scaling feels like you have to start the encounter with an extra sturge, an extra lizard folk. You don't. You can have 2 lizard folk walk in off the side and go, hey, why are you fighting our friends? And they join into the fray, right? And suddenly the battle escalates. Similarly, you could have one of those lizard folk run away screaming, in terror, right? And maybe for some story purpose that you could reveal later. You could have a number of things, reasons, thinking of reasons why a monster can exit the encounter or come into the encounter means you can have dynamic scaling. So when you see that scaling information, think about, hey, how would I add one of these during play? How would I remove one of these during play? And then you can do that dynamic bit, which is really, really useful for you because it lets you feel out that pace, not just at the beginning of the encounter, but during the encounter, right? If you realize, oh, man, my players could really use a break right now, let's come up with a reason why a couple of these exit, right? And you're not cheating because the adventure itself told you, hey, you can scale this encounter to create a different type of experience, right? The point is fun. There is no truth. This is all fiction. This is all fake game stuff. So, and nobody wrote it perfectly. They don't know your characters, how many players, how experienced, how many, none of that. So and the dice, right? Where the dice going to roll high or low for you, for the players. Nobody knows these things. So you can dynamically scale a battle to change it up. One last thing here, the Spies campsite, Jacko, is a neat kind of encounter with a lot of option here. And you could here weave in some character backstory, which is nice. One of the things you can do with NPCs is have the NPCs ask questions of the players that help the players add story. And this is a really nice technique to do because it helps your players think about, oh yeah, who am I playing? Where did they come from? What are they doing, right? So Jacko the rogue could say, hey, you, like let's say somebody has the criminal background. I could say, you, I think I've heard of you. You look like someone who was described me once. Are you involved with a roguish group? And let them tell you about it, right? Oh yeah, who runs that group? I think I know them. And this also gives the opportunity to the character to perhaps try some checks to also get in well with Jacko and get that discount, right? But it can be a nice way to weave things together. So feel free to invent that sort of fiction and connection. Ask for someone, if somebody has a priestly background or a wizardly background, then the appropriate NPC that has some sort of link to that can ask them about that background. Look for those opportunities. The characters, you can review those character boards. So make some notes about things of like, yeah, I can trigger off of that when this happens. Then that NPC can talk to them about this angle that I know they have on their backstory. But yeah, all of the encounters here are great. The Spider's Nest, the Hobgoblin Patrol, I think they're all really interesting. You can establish links to the Keep or to the Caves of Chaos as you like. My last tip that I'll say here is on magic items. And if you happen to have the core books for Dungeons and Dragons, whether it's the old ones or the new ones, they both have a section that talks about the qualities of a magic item. And magic items in this game, you will randomly pull a card and give it to them. It can be neat to have that table of Dungeon Master's Guide from the Dungeon Master Guide of magic item qualities and apply it to it to make the item more interesting. For example, imagine you have a magical dagger, right? Cool, that's awesome. But what if it always drips salt water? Or if it's bound, the pommel is a gemstone that blinks in a certain way, like it's trying to speak, right? The handle is wrapped in a particular material, right? And maybe it feels warm to the touch always. Playing around with those qualities, either inventing one or rolling on the table to pick one, can make an item even more fun. Even a mundane item, when it's a little interesting, can be more fun, right? There is a rope, but it has woven into its threads different colored strands. Could be cool, right? Just makes it interesting and unique and feels more rewarding when you are for the character that has those magic items and the player of that character. So it's a fun thing to do. So again, the wilderness encounters are really good. There are no major issues with these. I don't think there are any problems with it. It's really about hopefully these tips help you improve upon the experience and make it a little more easy for you to run them as part of the overall Heroes of the Borderlands experience that leads to all of these other story angles in the Keep and in the Caves of Chaos. Think of the wilderness as your glue that pulls the rest of that experience together and provides neat encounters along the way to paint a picture of the larger land surrounding the caves and the wilderness. Surrounding the caves and the Keep. So I hope this video has been useful to you and these tips help you have a great run of the wilderness section of the Heroes of the Borderlands Starter Set. If you have your own tips, especially if you've run them, and especially if you're a new DM or running with new players, I would love to hear your tips. Share them down below. I'll take a look at them and may share them in a future video. I will have a video on the Keep and on the caves in the next coming weeks in around my schedule. And I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon and makes these videos possible. I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you next time.